Jessica Jones has one of the darkest origins in the Marvel Universe, and it's way worse than the Netflix show told you. Let's get into the video and find out the origin of Jessica Jones. Jessica Campbell grew up as the kind of teenager most people overlooked. Quiet, observant, and secretly fascinated by the larger-than-life heroes who filled the headlines. She adored Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and carried a soft spot for a classmate named Peter Parker. One day, she trailed Peter to a science demonstration, rehearsing a dozen ways to start a conversation. But before she could work up the courage, everything changed. A strange spider sank its fangs into Peter, launching him towards a destiny that left Jessica standing alone in the crowd. Not long after, Jessica's world shattered. Her family set off on a vacation to Disney World, tickets courtesy of her father's boss, Tony Stark. Jessica and her brother Philip were arguing in the back seat when their father became distracted. Their car veered into a military transport hauling experimental chemical canisters. One container smashed through the windshield and ruptured, drenching Jessica in its contents. The crash claimed the lives of her entire family. Jessica was the only survivor. Jessica spent months unconscious, waking to the devastating reality that she had no one left. She was placed in an orphanage and eventually adopted by the Jones family. Returning to school was its own ordeal. She was called Coma Girl by Flash Thompson, and when Peter tried to offer sympathy, Jessica mistakenly thought he was pitying her and ran away, only to suddenly realize she was flying. She had no control over her flight and plunged into the New York harbor, where Thor himself pulled her from the water. In the days that followed, she discovered she possessed far more than flight. She had superhuman strength, enhanced durability, and accelerated healing. Determined to understand what she could do, Jessica trained herself relentlessly. During one of her early attempts at controlled flight, she crossed paths with the Scorpion and managed to defeat him with surprising ease. That victory pushed her toward becoming a hero. She crafted a costume, chose the name Jewel, and stepped into the world she had once admired from afar. But her bright beginning didn't last. Jewel fell prey to the Purple Man Killgrave, whose pheromone-based abilities allowed him to override her will entirely. For 8 horrific months, he used her as his personal puppet, culminating in an order to attack the Avengers Mansion and assassinate Daredevil. At the Avengers Mansion, Jessica struck the Scarlet Witch, and that single misfire snapped Killgrave's hold on her. Disoriented, she tried to flee, only to be intercepted by the Avengers. Vision blasted her, sending her into a coma. Carol Danvers intervened before the heroes could do further damage. Jessica eventually recovered in a S.H.I.E.L.D. medical facility. When she was well enough, they offered her a liaison position with the Avengers, but the trauma that she carried made her question whether she belonged in the superhero world at all, and she declined their offer. She briefly attempted a comeback under the name Nitrous, crossing paths with the Owl before Luke Cage and Iron Fist arrived on the scene. Jessica and Luke formed a friendship that slowly deepened and became an on-again, off-again tangle of affection and frustration. She walked away from her superhero identity entirely and founded Alias Investigations, a private detective agency where she could use her abilities on her own terms. She stayed close with Carol Danvers. She exposed a cheating wife to a husband whose fury erupted when he learned his wife was a mutant. Then, during a surveillance job, she accidentally filmed Steve Rogers changing into his Captain America uniform, realizing too late that she had been set up. She was interrogated, framed, and assaulted, but never gave up the tape, exposing Captain America's true identity. Afterwards, Captain America personally thanked her for protecting him. Carol Danvers, hoping Jessica would move on from Luke, gave Scott Lang, Ant-Man, her number. Jessica and Scott began dating. Around that same time, she investigated a mutant growth hormone ring and teamed up with Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, to rescue Maddie Franklin. Her next major case began when Kim Rourke begged her to find the man responsible for a mass tragedy, Killgrave. At Kim's home, Jessica found a room full of traumatized survivors. 34 people had died in a restaurant after Killgrave casually told them to stop breathing. Though he was imprisoned on the raft, the families wanted him to admit what he had done so they could have closure. Looking at all of their faces, Jessica couldn't refuse. She traveled to the raft with Clay Quartermain and confronted Killgrave directly. She demanded he acknowledge his crimes. Instead, he just mocked her, claiming she was nothing more than a fictional character. Jessica left furious, only to learn hours later that a riot had erupted and Killgrave had escaped. Afraid to return home or to her office, she stayed at Scott Lang's apartment. The next morning, she awoke to the sight of Scott's corpse covered in ants, only to realize Killgrave had forced the illusion on her. Killgrave escalated the torment, making her see her best friend, Carol Danvers, in bed with the two men she cared about, Luke Cage and Scott Lang. He then dragged her into the streets and ordered civilians to attack the person to their left, plunging the city into chaos. Amid the violence, Jessica saw a psychic projection of Jean Grey, who revealed she had implanted a mental trigger in Jessica's mind after her first encounter with Killgrave, something that could help her resist him. When Killgrave commanded her to kill any Avenger she chose, Jessica finally broke free. She turned on Killgrave and beat him down just as the Avengers arrived. In the aftermath of Killgrave, Jessica told Scott she was 3 months pregnant and that the baby wasn't his. Heartbroken, Scott walked away. Days later, she told Luke Cage the child was his. He asked if she wanted to keep the baby. When she said yes, they agreed to start a new chapter together. Looking for stability, Jessica accepted a consulting position at the Daily Bugle, contributing to a superhuman-focused column called The Pulse. Their biggest story came when Ben Urich uncovered evidence that Oscorp employees were disappearing and that Norman Osborn was secretly the Green Goblin. But before they could act, the Green Goblin attacked. Jessica fought him off but thought his attack had killed her baby. Spider-Man rushed Jessica to the hospital, where doctors confirmed her baby was doing well. Luke Cage then confronted Osborn in a rage, setting off the chain of events that led to the Goblin's exposure and arrest. Jessica continued her work at the Pulse, investigating the emergence of the Young Avengers. She tried to warn them about the dangers of being a hero, but ultimately chose to support them. She was present when Kang the Conqueror arrived to reclaim his younger self, Iron Lad, a reminder that no matter how far she tried to distance herself, the superhero world always found her. Later, Luke Cage proposed and Jessica accepted. They were eventually married, but Jessica chose to keep her maiden name. Jessica Jones continues to adventure in the Marvel Universe. Jessica broke free of Killgrave, and you can help me break free of the algorithm by hitting the like button, dropping a comment, and subscribing. Well, that's the origin of the Marvel character Jessica Jones, and that does it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Peace.